Are you a reluctant entrepreneur? Maybe you have a great idea or a product, or maybe you serve people in a really special way. Well, what happens when people want more of it, or maybe offer to pay you, but you don't want to have a business? You never dreamed that your ideas and talents would lead you to be an entrepreneur. Well, today's guest found herself in the exact same situation. With a passion for impactful design and fashion with a function, she created a clothing line for a very unique problem and reluctantly turned it into a thriving business. Have you ever felt like there's something more you're supposed to be doing with your life, but you're not sure what? Welcome to She Made It, the podcast that uncovers the journey to living a life that feels more like you. Welcome, Clara, to this episode. I'm so happy to have you here today. How are you?
I'm good. Things are a little topsy-turvy. I'm in my husband's sound booth because we have to live with his parents in between our apartment and our new house, but I'm making it work.
Yeah, and speaking of new house, I have a question for you. After speaking with our guest, and she really has this, she's a designer, and she really has this passion for functional design, impactful design. And because you are kind of getting moved into a new home and you're thinking of decorating, and I just want to ask, are you I love to have special things around my home, or I love to have special things, but they all have to have a meaning? Do you just like pretty things, or do you like meaningful things?
I'm pretty much a minimalist I try to be. I'm not perfect.
So you have nothing.
No, I do have some things. I think that I probably care a little bit more about how it looks and how it fits than the sentimental value.
Interesting. Yeah, I
There
have
are some things, but
yeah, I have a pretty strong need. In fact, almost unanimously, it either has to have function or meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't really understand the pot that just looks good on the shelf if it doesn't have some story behind it.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, today's guest and this conversation that's coming up is really, really talking about how you can have beautiful and functional. So I can't wait for you to hear it. On today's episode of She Made It, I'm connecting with Megan Sullivan. And Megan is a fashion designer, and she is the creator of the With Grace Be Bold clothing line. And it is this super innovative, super inspiring line of fashion dedicated to women who have undergone treatment for breast cancer. And her collection includes products that are designed to help women feel beautiful, feel confident and sophisticated through their recovery, but also beyond. And the thing that I love about Megan that I think we're going to learn today is that she has this immense passion for impactful design. She was a fashion designer, but really wanted her products, whatever she was creating to have purpose for the things that she was designing. So with Grace Be Bold, she redefines fashion for function and proves that clothing doesn't just have to be stylish, but it can serve a great purpose as well. So you'll hear during our conversation the inspiration behind Megan's brand. So welcome, Megan.
Hi, Elle. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So Megan, in this time of, I guess we're not quite in complete lockdown, but we're in this, quarantine-ish time of COVID-19. Where are you right now?
Yeah. So I live in downtown Cincinnati. So it's been interesting because I think, this past year, when you live in a hustling, bustling city like this, you really see the impact that a pandemic can have on a community. So it's been, it's definitely been a journey this past year, just kind of getting through everything that's happened. But we're doing okay. So that's good.
Yeah. I have a question to get us started. This is what I love to ask my guests. So what is your first creative memory?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I feel like I have so many creative memories just having gone through, design school and graduating from DAP, and I have always been a creative person. I remember when I was younger, my mom used to say that, I would never ask for toys. I would always ask for a new box of crayons because I just loved drawing and I loved being, I don't know, innovative and creative. So going back to when I was a child, I don't know if our listeners are going to remember this, but some might. There was a artist that used to draw like live action drawing on TV. I think his name was Raffi, and it was like a PBS program or something that I would kind of wake up to. And my mom would set me up on a little easel, and I would, the point was that he would teach children how to draw, and I that has just stuck with me, that I just found so much, I guess, passion and creative energy from learning the art of drawing and just watching him work and kind of learning to do the things that he was doing. I sort of idolized him in a way. And I think that was probably the first moment I can remember feeling like, wow, I think there's an artist somewhere within me that's just waiting to, have a career in this. So
and so cool for your mom to see that in you, and then to put the tools, the resources, the opportunities in front of you to cultivate and develop that. I love that. And I do remember is it Raffi or Rafi? I do remember him.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you remember him, because I feel like I have not said his name in probably 20 years. But my mom has always been, both of my parents are both very nurturing. And I think I was really blessed to have a family that sort of nurtured that side of me. I think they kind of just let me explore. And once we found out that I was a creative person, I can't say enough about how much they nurtured that part of my life, which is really great.
Yeah. And then so how did that, like the little girl asking for crayons instead of toys, and I can just see you perched up with a little easel, how did that lead to fashion design?
Well, it's funny. I think just like anyone can say about their journey, my journey has had a lot of twists and turns. And, growing up, I knew I was creative, and I kind of always saw myself as an engineer at heart. I was always trying to figure things out. And so that side of me has always been there. But it was interesting when I was in high school. I also have this really kind of intellectual business side to me. And I always laugh because I was determined to be a corporate lawyer, which, as you can imagine, is totally different than fashion design. It probably couldn't be more opposite of a career path. And I sort of applied to the design program at UC, the DAP program. I applied on a whim, which sounds a little bit odd, but there was something drawing me to that program. And I sort of left the career in law behind.
That is what I love is that you're like growing up, seeing your talents, and you're thinking engineer, lawyer, fashion designer. And so I'm asking, do you have like this math mind too? Because I think of an engineer as being math and science. Like, where did that come from?
I do. Actually, I love math. I have always been fascinated by math, not so much science, which I think maybe is where I kind of strayed away from an engineer, because the science part was always a little bit tough for me. But math, I've always been, intrigued by. And it's, what's so interesting is where I've ended up today. Entrepreneurship really sort of cultivates every aspect of these skills that I've collected over the years in a way that I don't think I could have ever predicted for myself. I sort of feel like, I was in design school, and I had been working. So my first job in high school was working at Abercrombie. And, I was 16, and it was the first time I'd ever worked a retail job. And I think I loved it more than the typical 16-year-old. And so that's where I started realizing, like, I really, have an interest in fashion and clothing. And that's what pulled me into fashion design. But I think being an entrepreneur sort of rounded out all my skills into one career path.
Yeah. And where do you think being a lawyer came from?
I think that came from my dad. So my dad, his whole family, him and my grandfather are both engineers. And I think that he's always been sort of the logistical, methodical kind of person. And I think the lawyer aspect probably happened because my parents are very different. It's kind of an opposites attract kind of marriage, which is a good thing. But I think for me, being a lawyer, just always, I was really good at explaining things, and I was really good at seeing both sides because my parents are so different. And I don't know, I think there was always something about law that intrigued me because I was always really good at kind of seeing the truth behind things. And I don't know, there was just something about it that kind of intrigued me, I guess.
But you're so right when you say that entrepreneurship sort of brings it all together, because the ability to describe, to have the conversation about what you do, to see both sides, the mediator, the math, of course, and then the design. I love that you applied to DAP almost on a whim, because that also tells me that you have this connection to your intuition.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I said, I do have this very methodical side to me. So I don't always do things on a whim, which is also interesting being an entrepreneur, because a lot of the decisions I make are thought out, but sometimes you have to be willing to pivot very quickly. And I really truly did. I think you're right. I think intuition is such a beautiful way to frame it, that was probably the first time in my adult life that I really let my intuition guide me. Mm-hmm. And I've never really thought of it that way, but that's a really beautiful way to look at it.
Well, and then the whole person, seeing that 16-year-old in the fashion retail environment, the influences of your parents, thinking back to your childhood, and how it's sort of like all has come together now. I'd love to hear the story behind With Grace Be Bold. Like, you're in fashion design. I know you have this passion for, and you talked about it even with your desire to pursue possibly engineering, this, the function, the impact, the purpose behind what you're designing. Where did the With Grace Be Bold inspiration come from?
Yeah, and that's so true. I think in a way, without me even realizing it, it was sort of my way to combine all of these different things. But the real inspiration was rooted in my mom being a breast cancer survivor. And I went into DAP, and I sort of always, especially wanting to, before that, pursue a degree in law, I always liked job security. And so when I went into DAP, I didn't necessarily start the program thinking I'm going to start my own clothing line. But as I got into the program and I was doing corporate internships, I started realizing that as much as the creative aspect was fulfilling, I really wanted to feel like my designs were helping people from like an integral purpose perspective. And I sort of felt like there was something missing, like a missing link. And, that probably was the engineer in me, because a lot of times clothing is not necessarily meant to be functional. It is functional in the fact that, in the ways we wear it, but it's not always designed with functionality in mind. And I started feeling like, well, okay, there's no better cause than, women that are dealing with different like health issues or different things that aren't typically thought of in the fashion industry. And so I started doing research, and I realized, well, my mom had breast cancer. That's sort of a good place to start, because I really wanted to, at that point, I was so young when she had breast cancer. I really had never talked to her about what that was like. And sure enough, within minutes of talking to her, she started explaining that clothing was a huge pain point. And as a designer, that's a light bulb moment. That was sort of my gears started working, and I kind of went into problem solution mode. And I honestly felt really driven emotionally by what she went through. And I think, I've said this before in interviews, that sometimes I feel like her diagnosis, it's like going through these parts of her journey with her. It was like I was reliving that diagnosis all over again, because I was talking to her about it as an adult. And, breast cancer specifically, it's dealing with a very, feminine womanly part of your body. And as a young girl, I didn't have breasts. I didn't understand the anatomy, and the emotional connection to being a woman. And when I, sat down with her in college, I understood that. And it was really emotional for me because I just couldn't believe that she had gone through all of this behind closed doors. And it just turned into a snowball. I mean, I just ran with it. And like I said, I started going into problem solution mode, and it's kind of brought me, I guess, where I am now with everything.
What a beautiful opportunity for you as an adult woman to reconnect with your mom on something, like you said, that's so personal, so feminine. But now taking that, one, it probably got, created a bonding or a closeness between the two of you. But now there's this level of empathy that you have for those going through it. And I really, really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's so important. So tell me about that moment when you're trying to figure out how do I solve this problem, and you sort of started with that, like this like click. Tell me about that.
I feel like well, first of all, I do want to respond that I agree with the notion of empathy. I'm so glad you pointed that out, because I think this has taught me more about empathy, I think, than anything else. And I truly believe it has changed me as a person, because I just see the world differently now. And, for me, this was a pretty major problem, I feel like, to tackle, just because when you are an engineer or designer, you sort of just want, you're a fixer, right? You kind of want to fix everything all at once. And I kind of had to take it one step at a time. And the thing that I started with was, when she was sent home from the hospital, she was sent home with a surgical drain. And you can imagine this, it's like a rubber bulb. It's about the size of a lemon, and it helps to drain fluids away from an incision site after surgery. And when she got home from the hospital, it was something that was a very unexpected and unexpectedly cumbersome part of her recovery. And you can imagine, when you're diagnosed with cancer, you're thrown into this world, very quickly, and you sort of don't have time to come up for air. And a lot of times you come out of surgery and, you are just taking one thing at a time. And it can be pretty overwhelming when you're sent home after, going through all of this. And so she had this surgical drain that she just kept talking about. And that's the thing, as a designer, you really learn to listen to your consumers, and you learn to listen to the people that you're designing for. And knowing that she kept bringing this up as a pain point, I knew that it was something I had to tackle. And that's where I started. I was like, okay, well, one of the things that was most painful for her is that there really weren't a lot of fashionable and sophisticated clothing items that held that drain in place, but also made her feel sophisticated from the outside. And one thing to know about my mom is she's very private. She's a very private person. I respect her in a lot of ways for that, because I think, everyone handles things differently in life, and it's completely fine. Those that are more outward about the things they're going through, and more inward, like my mom. But I really respected that she was private, and I wanted to make sure that whatever I designed was concealed, so that you didn't know what she was going through from the outside. And so I sort of just made a blueprint. I had this drain in hand. I started working with a hospital to access the drain itself, because I knew I needed to, really start there. And I used my dress form, and I really just started building this garment from the inside out. I thought about the functionality. I thought about the other things that women go through, like they have a hard time with upper body mobility. They have a hard time reaching their hands over their head. So the wrap closure and all these things just sort of came together. And that's what I was mentioning, that creative moment when, it's like you put the final snap on, and everything just works, and the drain's concealed, and you're left with this beautiful garment that, I love taking my garment to trade shows, because I usually keep it clasped so that you don't see the drain hanging inside. And I can literally see the light bulb go off in people's heads when I open the garment, and they're like, oh my gosh, I would never have known that giant.
Oh, I love that. It's like you recreate that moment for your consumers, that moment that you had, which was like gives me goosebumps when you talk about it.
Yeah, it was sort of, I did want to recreate that. And it's kind of one of those things you hold on, there are a lot of people that have said, well, why don't you display the garment so you can see the drain? And I always say, that's the point. I don't want this to be completely exposed. I want there to be this moment of, vulnerability where people realize, wow, I would have never expected that's someone wearing this could be going through something like that. And yeah, I think it's important to recreate those moments for the people that you are designing for.
And how many iterations, like how many versions did you have, or how many attempts?
So when I started from sketch to prototype, I would say my sketches changed a lot. I actually started this as athletic apparel, and I was working on this as a project in a class in college where we were designing for an existing brand. And at that time, I was designing for the champion brands of athletic wear at Target, which, that had a lot of truth to it because I was really thinking about where could these garments be very accessible. And, every woman loves Target. So that's how it started. And as I got through it and talked to more and more women and really worked through the design, I realized that I think people desire something a little bit more elevated. I was realizing that there are a lot of, robes and loungewear and things that have drain pockets, but nothing felt like truly fashionable. So I started to pivot towards that direction. And once I got through the process of draping, where I was taking material and I was taking fabric and sort of manipulating it on my dress form to try to create this illusion that, the drain was hidden under the material. Once I really got that under wrap, I would say the design to this day hasn't changed much from that, which is great because I think I spent so much time perfecting that it has worked really well and I haven't had to do too many modifications.
So I have a question because I think of it the way we've described it as a recovery piece of clothing. But then you say very clearly, this is not a recovery brand and this is not a recovery top. So then what is it?
Yeah. So that was something, again, as I was talking to women, it's meant for this recovery, I guess, portion of their treatment. But for me, I never wanted to label this as a recovery brand. It's a fashion collection that has a functional component. And the reason behind that was so many women that I was speaking to were saying, I really don't want to invest in recovery clothing. I feel like after you have surgery and you come home, you live so long in recovery that you sort of get to a point where you just don't want to be reminded of that anymore. And so I think that for me, I just wanted to differentiate the function. Yes, this is functioning for recovery, but it's not, outwardly a recovery brand.
Right. I appreciate that. So tell me, when I think of that, tell me what what's behind the name of your business. Sorry about that phone ringing.
Oh, that's okay. So originally I had named the business Be Bold, and it was sort of an ode to wanting women to feel bold and confident and just ready to conquer the world in, this collection. And I have to be honest, this is one of those things that people would never know. And it's honestly pretty funny. I was getting word marks and trademarks on, that name and on my logo. And my attorney called me one day and I could tell, he was kind of laughing. He said, well, we registered this in the state of Ohio, but when we go to look at global, trademarks, there are a lot of people in other states that have already marked the phrase Be Bold, which is now looking back, it's funny because I can totally understand that. I think that's a pretty, commonly used phrase. But we had this discussion and he said, well, why don't you think about putting some words in front of it that have additional meaning? And so I've always really liked the idea of having underlining, meaning in things. And my mom's first name is Anne. And so I did, I did some digging and found that Anne, the name Anne, translates to mean grace. And I love that because I think saying with grace, be bold, you're kind of adding this layer of, in whatever graceful way you're handling this situation, like continue to feel confident about yourself. It just was sort of this happy accident, I guess, or happy mistake that I think in the end, it added a lot more to what that name represents.
Well, and it goes back to your mother's sort of journey with her own breast cancer was that she didn't want it to be bold. She didn't want everybody to know about it. So it's like that ability to be bold without it being this big public display is sort of what I read into with Grace Be Bold. It's that inner boldness. So I love that.
Exactly. Yes, I love inner boldness. That's a really great way to describe it. That's exactly kind of how I feel.
And the names of your pieces have names as well. So are those named after certain people? The Eileen, and what's the other one?
Yes. So the Anne Elizabeth is named after my mom. Her name is Anne Elizabeth. And that garment is the garment that features the drain pocket on the inside. And then the other garment is sort of a sister piece to the Anne Elizabeth. It's called the Eileen. And that is one of my aunts that is also a breast cancer survivor. And that garment is the exact same garment. It just doesn't have the pocket on the interior. And that's great. It was originally designed so that women that aren't themselves going through breast cancer can still, support the brand and wear the clothing, because I had so many people say, well, I love that top. I love the design, but I don't personally have breast cancer, so I really don't have a use for it. And again, it was another light bulb of, well, why not? I honestly think that makes the brand more inclusive. And it speaks to this idea that it's not just a recovery brand. It's, it's fashionable clothing that anyone feels confident in. And it's also special because it sort of speaks to their individual journeys with cancer. My mom's was more invasive. She did have drains. She had, chemo and radiation. And my Aunt Eileen had a little bit of a less invasive cancer, and she had a different treatment plan. So she didn't have drains. And I've found that garment has been incredibly beneficial for women like her that, may still have other, mobility issues, or, they're going through radiation. They have a port from chemo, things like that, but they don't have a need for that pocket. I feel like that garment just can do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So tell me what it was like when you decided, okay, this is a business and now I'm going to step into entrepreneurship.
Yes. So that portion of the process was quite terrifying, I have to be honest, because...
And that's sort of where I met you, actually, right? You were in that process because Megan and I met as part of, I guess, would you call it like an incubator? Aviator Accelerators is an incredible program helping entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, launch and grow their business. So Megan and I met through one of the classes that I teach is on how to present, your pitch, how to just have a better presence, confidence as you speak about your business and yourself. So again, back to your terrifying journey. So going from a student in DAP, which is this elite art academy in Cincinnati, into now I have this viable product, this useful, functional, meaningful. You've been working with hospitals. How does it now become a business and a product?
Yeah. So I would say that the terrifying aspect comes in the sense that, like I mentioned before, I never necessarily set out to be a designer that, I never wanted my own clothing line. And there was a mix of different people in DAP where a lot of people came into the program really wanting that. Some people discovered it along the way. Some people were like me and were like, I would prefer to just go, I would really like to work for an existing business. And so once I kind of, I guess, devoted my designing to this market, I had so many people from the get-go say to me, you really need to do something with this. You should, this has legs, that you need to create a business around this or launch this as a capsule collection with an existing designer. And it did. It terrified me.
You're like, no.
Yeah. And I think one thing too that I am totally comfortable admitting is I was never a salesperson. I was great at working retail and, and selling from that perspective, but I'm definitely not a pushy or, outward kind of person, which I think salespeople get a bad rap because we all assume that selling a product takes, you have to kind of nag people. And so I almost think there's like a stereotype that we need to get out of our heads about selling products, because I've come to find that that's really not the case. But just, in the beginning, after I'd worked through this design, I never wanted to, quote unquote, make money from this. I was sort of just wanting to help people. And, I had considered, do I just donate these? Do I start a nonprofit? Does this become a philanthropic mission? And the more that I worked on this and found how much of a need there was and how much of a market there was for this, I had professors and mentors and people guiding me that I really credit them for me even launching this business, because it really took a lot of people backing me and motivating me, and saying, you're finding out you have enough of an established market that I really think that it's worth trying. I think it's worth, trying to make this into something. And so I did, and I graduated with my undergrad in 2015, and I went on to get my master's in 2016. And from 2016 to 2017, I worked on a Kickstarter campaign, because the first thing I needed, if I was going to take this and run with it, I needed money for, legal fees to, mark my brands. I needed money for manufacturing, because that takes capital up front. And so I sort of laid out this groundwork, kind of initial business plan of all the things that I needed. And I launched a Kickstarter campaign. And it's funny because I believe Nancy first approached me, I think in 2018, which was right after I had, succeeded in my Kickstarter funding. I had gotten my garments in, and her and I had talked about me joining the Aviator program at that point. And
for our listeners, real quick, Nancy Akoltz is the CEO of Aviator Accelerators and a huge, huge supporter of women entrepreneurs. Yeah. So keep going. So she approached you.
Yeah, exactly. She approached me then. And I think this is something, when you're looking at the formation of a business, it is intimidating, and you kind of have to take help when it's given every step of the way. And Nancy was just an incredible, she still is. She's been an incredible mentor, and people like you, Elle, and everyone that's connected to that program have just been wonderful in growing all of these women, and helping to grow their businesses as you go through that process. But I will say there's definitely something to be said about timing, because I waited and went into that program in 2019. And her and I have both said we are so glad that's when I sort of took that plunge, because I was at the point of, I had turned it into a business, I had started running with it, and I needed to, succeed in growth potential. And so that's sort of the Cliff Notes version of the journey over the past few years. But, it took time. It definitely took time for me to commit to turning this into a business.
Yeah, and so you said sales was sort of like the big not stumbling block, but maybe resistance for you. Like, okay, I know how to design. I know this is, functional, powerful, but the question is, how do I sell? So what have you done to overcome that? Are you the salesperson? Did you hire somebody? What's your sort of methodology for selling right now?
Yeah, I do think it's been something I've had to overcome, and I am in that salesperson role. It's just me. I kind of am a one-woman team right now, and I do look to hire in the future, hire people to help me with different aspects of running the business. And, I think that I have found something that's helped me overcome, this barrier, I guess, with being a salesperson is I have the passion to speak to my products. And I have had to kind of let my guard down and be very, we talked before we started this interview about vulnerability, and I think being vulnerable and admitting, that may not be something I'm, great at and something I have to learn. I think people appreciate that. And my customers have appreciated that. And my supporters have appreciated that. So I've had to just kind of look at sales in a different way. It's every sale to me is helping someone, and framing it that way and looking at it as I'm not necessarily, making money or trying to turn profit. I mean, I am, because then I can grow my business and make more products that help people. But for me, just reframing the mindset of sales equals support. Like by selling, I am supporting people, I'm helping people, I'm making their lives better. That has been a game changer for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's, again, when you find your ideal client, it's probably a no-brainer. It's getting it in front of the right people, sharing how it solves the problem, and then letting the product talk for itself. And I love how you say that, you talked about, do I donate this? Do I make it a nonprofit? And there's something really powerful to that exchange, that energetic exchange of money that supports the growth of expanding the business to create more products to help more people. And not that you can't do that in a nonprofit as well, but in just if you're donating, sure, there could be supporters and all that to help you expand it. But I think because you're the creator, you're the visionary behind it, there is something really reciprocal to the exchange of money for your ideas, for your service.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. And I think I've also found that, yes, this garment is something that a lot of women want to invest in for themselves, but it's also something that people want to invest in to help their loved ones. And so that kind of exchange of a transaction for them to feel like by purchasing this garment, they are helping someone that they care very much about. I do think that this gives them that opportunity as well, which
I love that.
which is good.
Yeah. So what would you tell another woman who has this great idea and getting feedback maybe from people, but feels incredibly intimidated by entrepreneurship?
I would say this is something that Nancy from Aviatra was really great at teaching all of us. Is she used to refer to it as eating an elephant, like one bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I've always kind of liked that mentality of, I'm a type A, I'm a planner, I'm a list maker. And so being overwhelmed brings me anxiety. And for someone else that's feeling that and feeling like, how in the world am I going to take this from where it's at and make a business out of it? My best advice is to break it into manageable chunks and look at it as projects. Like every step of the process becomes its own project that you'll have a great sense of fulfillment in finishing. So for example, when I knew that I needed funding, to, like I said, fund all of the upfront capital, upfront costs it would take to actually create the business. So at that point, my project was finding funding. So I was looking at different crowdfunding campaigns. I was looking at, bank loans. I kind of, that becomes, I guess, a project, a step of the process. And if you just keep breaking all of your, necessary to-dos into these, things that you can tackle sort of one at a time, I truly can't say enough about how that helps you mentally, emotionally. It just makes it more manageable. And it has been something that stuck with me all the way to today.
Yeah, it's like the, you have to have the big vision. You have to have the goal in mind at the end, but it's not a leap. It's tiny steps.
Exactly. Yes. And I think you naturally just learn to put one foot in front of the other, and you learn the process as you go. And I do truly think for women that are in that point, definitely do not be afraid to ask for help. I have relied so much on the support of mentors and people that have surrounded me with, positivity and motivation. And I truly believe that it takes you being willing to accept help and ask questions. I am a question asker. I'm one of those that believes there is no stupid question in the world. And I, run the risk of asking too many questions versus not enough, because I think, we cannot expect to be experts about everything. None of us are. I'm not, I still have people say, I don't know how you've done all this. And, it truly, I've made so many mistakes. We all have. But I think you have to be willing to ask for direction and ask for help on things that, just know your skills, like know what you're really good at. And there are going to be things along the way that you do feel intimidated by, but that's where you can bring in the skills of others to help you.
So what about, like, going back to the example of, okay, funding. Funding is my project, and I'm going to break that project into steps. What about here's a no, here's a door closed, here's a no. What do you do when you have one of those mini projects that just keeps bringing failure or setback?
Yeah. So I've had those. I have definitely had my share of those. For me, one of the biggest things, funding definitely has been. I haven't necessarily had doors shut, but I have found that it is hard. It's hard to find funding. It can be hard as a woman-owned business. In a lot of ways, we are able to access minority funding that a lot of others can't, which I think is a positive, but funding's a big one. For me, I would say a lot of doors have closed in my face on manufacturing. So I have gone through 3 different factories. I have had damaged goods. I've had damaged material. I've lost money. I think that if I would have had a give up mindset, I would not still be where I am right now. And the thing that's really gotten me through those moments is the passion for this product being successful. You have to always keep going back to, what is my who, what is my purpose? Who am I doing this for? You really have to rely heavily on personal commitment and passion for what you're doing. And that's why I say to a lot of people, make sure you have that in the beginning, because that is going to carry you through a lot of different closed doors. And the second thing too is, I always look at those doors closing as opportunities. I really firmly believe that when a door closes, another one opens. And I think you have to, and it's taken me a long time. This was not an overnight, breakthrough, but you really have to be willing to stay positive, let yourself have bad days, but turn those bad days into this, passion to solve the problem.
Yeah. I mean, and you just said it, that the failures are for you framed as opportunities. And to keep yourself from getting into the hole, like a bad day leading to bad days, is by that ability to remind yourself of who am I creating this for? What problem is it solving? And that is, that's just super powerful. And it's hard in the midst of those failures or those setbacks to continue to remind yourself. And just to sort of pull in what you also said is that, but it's the support of others. Like, this whole idea almost started with the urging of other people. And so the importance of support and those outside voices to help us keep moving forward. Yeah, I would love to know, how do you pursue creativity in your life now?
I believe that I'm sort of a creative at heart. And I think I've seen that in a lot of other people too, where, you're creative in like a general sense, to where you kind of have a lot of different things that are skills and that you're good at. And, obviously this business is a creative outlet for me, but once the product has launched, I have found that I'm more of an operational person in the collection now, which is okay. And I'm excited to get back to the point of being able to design new products and get my creative juices flowing. But I have had to find other outlets to keep that creativity moving. And I actually had one of my mentors and professors in college encouraged me, because sometimes I would feel like, if I'm putting energy into other creative things, am I taking away from my main focus? Like, am I taking away from my business by having other things that I'm also spending time on? And I will never forget her giving me this advice that sometimes you have to put energy into other things to refill your tank and have the, the energy to put back into what you're really focused on. And that really helped me because I was kind of carrying this self-guilt of, if I love doing what I'm doing, but I'm also painting and I'm also, illustrating other things, like, am I taking away from my business essentially? And she told me I wasn't. And so I find a lot of joy in other things. I love to paint. I love to draw. I love to make things. I'm a crafter at heart. So I make all kinds of different, things for my house. And yeah, I love the feeling of making something with your bare hands. And I've kind of carried that through. And I know, aren't you a painter too, Elle? Or I remember you having a creative outlet too that you like.
Yeah. I started as an actress, so I was a performing artist, singer, dancer, and so what I have been dabbling in is visual art. So I'm a budding visual artist, a visual artist in training.
Yeah, but that's amazing.
Yeah, and I do love it. And I just want to sort of, again, emphasize what you said, that it's like creativity doesn't have a limit. It's not like there's a tank, and if we use it we focus it in one area, that it's, and we want to focus in another area, that it's going to deplete the tank. It's actually the opposite. It's the more we create, the more the tank fills. And so it's not an either or, it's really a both and. Like, it's this web that everything you do, crafting, painting, drawing, is really also in service to your business.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to say it. It is. It's all filling the same tank, and the more full the tank is, the more that you have to put into things. So yeah, it's kind of that's been a fun realization for me, because I do really like to get my hands in different things, and I sort of had to let myself do that. I sort of had to give myself that permission, and it's really fun.
And I hear that from a lot of women, especially if, we're in a phase of life where we're taking care of other people, children, or we're in a very career-focused part of our life. The permission to get into the creative side of ourself. And oftentimes, if we're not feeling creative or we don't have that outlet, the other parts of ourself tend to get a little like hardened or closed. And so I actually have, one of the other things that I've developed is a process called creative uncovery, where a woman, whether they're an artist, whether they're whoever they are, just knowing that we're all designed to be creators, we're all designed to make things. And so it's a way to sort of allow a woman to step into that side of herself that may be a little neglected. Yeah. So I'm enjoying that, because it's really helping people, like if they're, maybe they hate their job and they think it's another job, but really it's about that permission that you're talking about, granting themselves permission to explore, to be more self-expressive. And it's been very transformational for people. So I sort of have done that with my own life, gone through that process. I was raising kids, very, very focused on building really my husband's brand, and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm kind of suffocating here. I don't have anything that is just uniquely me. And being that I'm also very creative at heart, that was sort of the place I went. I went to awaken and nurture my creativity, and it's just been really transformational for me personally, and now I can really help other women do that too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a really beautiful story. And I do think there are a lot of people that resonate with that. And I agree. I mean, it's just the whole idea that you can't pour from an empty tank. And, I feel like it's just when you can get to that point, like you said, where you have this sort of, awakening, you figure that out and pour back into yourself. I think it's the effects that creates, and, just seeing the people around you affected positively by that. And, it's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful thing to rediscover yourself in that way.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Megan? What's next for With Grace Be Bold, and for you personally?
Yeah. So right now I'm in a round of manufacturing, and that's really exciting. And we are working on the development of my next new product, which I'm very excited for. a collection of head wraps, which
I love that.
yeah. So they're really beautiful, just like my garments. They're beautiful and sophisticated. I think they're going to be worn by women, for a lot of different reasons. I don't think it's just going to be for cancer recovery, but I'm working on that, and that's exciting. I'm working with a local factory now, and that's just been wonderful because it's definitely kind of plugged the holes that I've had in manufacturing with people that are all over the country and the world. It's amazing when you have partners that are close, especially with manufacturing. That's a big one. So I have those exciting things going on. I'm actually getting married in January.
Oh, that's a big one.
That's a really big one. Yeah. I think 2020 started off pretty rough, and a lot of things happened, and I feel like I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping this is, I'm starting to feel things sort of start to feel good again and turn around. And I think a lot of that is just personal mentality. Like we're talking about, I think I've had to find ways to, again, like give myself energy and find positivity in all of this. And it's hard. I mean, this year has been really tough, but I'm trying to find the positive and the good things that are happening. So
yeah, well, good luck and congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you so much. We're excited.
Yeah, so if people want to learn more about you, if they want to see your product, see your the Eileen or the Anne Elizabeth, where would they go to find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media. I have all of the typical Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. My social media handle is with Grace B, the letter B, bold. And then my website has all of my products. You can shop. You can learn more about my story. There's a lot of links on there. That is with Grace B, again, the letter B, bold.com.
Awesome, Megan. And we'll leave all those details in the show notes as well. And again, I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm so grateful for your sharing of your story, and just also for what you do to serve women who are in a very, very difficult experience and beyond, right? And beyond.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much, Elle. I'm thrilled to have the chance to tell my story, and hopefully it helps someone out there that, may be dealing with similar situations. That's always my hope at the end of this.
I loved Megan's interview so much. I think that her story is amazing. And I think one of my biggest takeaways is that there can be this sort of strange mentality that starting a business is not people focused and isn't as impactful as like a helping profession. But I love that Megan really brought out that her business, and I think you talked about this too, is one of the most powerful ways that people can help other people. And I just really appreciated that perspective.
Yeah, and she's got a really cool give back program too. She's there's something really special about the sort of idea for this story. The idea for this product came from the journey that her mother went through that she didn't even really know about. So she was able to go through that again and then not just serve her mom, but all those that are going through the same experience in a way that's really full circle.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I loved hearing the process of how she sort of uncovered those pieces from her past and her mom's story, like you were saying, and what she loved to blend it all into one thing that fit her so perfectly. And it really does remind me of your creative uncovery process and how you help women do that, whether it's a business or not. But I just thought her story was the perfect example of that.
If you'd like to learn more about Creative Uncovery, you can go to lzimmerman.com, find out more information, or always follow me on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of She Made It.